Well, it's okay. It's just my family's here.
Yay!
Pretty drained, so I'm gonna just say thanks for being here the day afterwards. And Mindy, I'm gonna invite Mona and Molly and Mindy up to light the chalice and say some opening words.
Okay.
Oh, I did also want to share that apparently, in addition to everything that happened yesterday, we had a bird living in the parish hall overnight, which was fun.
Wow. Even the avian life noticed.
Exactly.
I wanted to read this from Robert Frost's poem, Death of a Hired Man, which is very famous for this line. Home is the place where when you have to go there, they have to take you in. That's the line everybody quotes, but it's the next line that's actually so much like this place was. So, husband and wife, there's a hired man who's coming on, he's not dependable, and so the husband is complaining, why is he back? So she says to him, Warren, she said, he has come home to die. You needn't be afraid he'll leave you this time. Home, he mocked gently. Yes, what else but home? It all depends on what you mean by home. Of course, he's nothing to us anymore. Then was the hound that came a stranger to us out of the woods, worn out by the trail. The husband says, home is the place where when you have to go there, they have to take you in. Said Carneville. And the wife replies, I should have called it something you somehow haven't to deserve.
Introduce Edgar. So, some of you know this, but for my folks and family's sake, this is our little ragtag Unitarian Universalist congregation. And Edgar has spoken here on like an annual basis for like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I think this is my third time.
Yeah, so
Project, Douglas.
Edgar's spoken here 3 or 4 times over the last 3 or 4 years and has helped us understand. We've been thinking a lot about this situation with the University of Orange and the Hub and the Faith+Works congregation. Edgar's helped us think it through monasteries with the metaphor that Edgar uses of prayer and work and learning, study. But I think in particular, Edgar's talks here have helped us really come to a sense of what the congregation's role as a place for spiritual discernment for the work we're doing is, which I think has been a really invaluable contribution to how we're slugging through the world. So, really my honor to welcome once again the Reverend Dr. Edgar Rivera Colón to the Hub and the Faith+Works Church.
Thank you. Thank you. And hello to all our folks who are online. And actually, I'm going to do a real 90s thing, and I'm going to bookmark the talk I'll give, or a homily, or a sermon, or whatever, by 2 videos actually, so music videos. And can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? I'm gonna project now. I'm gonna project. So,
Do you guys want to move?
yeah, so it's
What do we need here? Oh, no, Myrna needs the air.
yeah.
Can you put it back on? Just what? Just that one.
Excellent. So it's great to be back here. I think it's my third time talking here or preaching here. And well, as always, I send you greetings from the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, our Bishop Yvette Flunder at our home church in Oakland, California, and of course, Bishop William Barber of the Poor People's Canopy. I send you their greetings. I always mention you when we talk your work here in Orange, New Jersey. And today, I wanted to start with a video. It's a very beautiful video, and what's interesting about it, it's very spiritual, but grounded in the natural world. It's a very interesting sort of mix of mystical and poetic. It reminds me of the work of almost William Blake, for those of you who know William Blake. And so we'll start there, and then I'm going to do a little bit of a meditation, which I've done with this congregation before, called the Contemplatio ad Amorem, or the contemplation to attaining God's love, just the start of it. So I'll ask you to sort of sit straight, or however you feel comfortable, and just begin. It's sort of a preamble. And then we're going to go to a text which I think is important. It's Dr. King's last text, right? And it's really, where do we go from here? And I think it should be here. There we go. Chaos or community. And I'm going to read a little bit about that and just talk a little bit about that. So this book was written in Jamaica. Dr. King took 2 weeks off, which was a big deal for him. Mrs. King, Coretta Scott King, came with him, and some of his closest advisors came with him. And he wrote this book. 67 is a very important turning point for Dr. King. He, later in the spring, he talks about the Vietnam War at Riverside Church in New York City, and that becomes very controversial. He loses some support because now he's not just doing civil rights, but he's also doing the peace movement. And in a strange way, not that strange, this book in many ways anticipates the questions that we're struggling with today in the United States, right? Whether it's globally, we can sort of think about that. So if you don't mind, it is a very beautiful lyrical video, and I just encourage you to listen to it for a bit, and then we'll do a little contemplation, then I'll talk, and then we'll end with a little video as well.
Is this one right?
Yes. And if you could put the captions on, that would be lovely.
Captions, okay.
It's called The Lost Words Blessing.
Enter the wild with care, my love, and speak the things you see. Let your names take a root and thrive and grow. And even as you travel far from heather, crag, and river, may you, like the little fisher, set the stream alight with glitter. May you enter now as water, without falter into water. Look to the sky with care, my love, and speak the things you see. Let your names take a root and thrive and grow.
why did this ex-Jesuit choose that video? Part of it is, for me, the video is beginning to talk about our embeddedness in the natural world, that we're part of the natural world, and that in fact the crisis that we're living in is an earth crisis, right? And this earth crisis means we have to develop another language in which, the silverfish is our kin, in which we have little lights that we leave for generations to come. And they have that line, which I sort of struggle with, right, because I'm a hope person, right? When all hope is gone, let the raven, right? It's like, hold on, I'm a Christian, we have a lot of hope, but I think there is something about the moment we're living in, the conjuncture of a planetary crisis, the levels of violence that we're seeing in the world. And Mindy has often talked about this. We have an illusion that somehow we're safe. No, we're not. We're interconnected, interdependent beings. And what happens in Palestine will happen to us. What happens with a pandemic will happen to us. And as you know, many of you know that my mom died during the pandemic. She went to a hospital in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, for those of you who don't know, is one of the colonies of the United States. So we have third level, fourth level grade healthcare. And she was just there for a wound, and she, just to care for a wound, she was suffering from Alzheimer's, but she was pretty much functioning with my sister-in-law and my brother in this little house in the southern part of Puerto Rico, and she passed in the hospital. Now I say that not as I did grieve her, but I thought to myself, and I was all alone in my apartment in Jersey City, because we're under lockdown, I thought to myself, thousands and thousands of people are experiencing this right now. And part of maybe what we need to do in figuring out where we're at, what is the actual conjuncture, the spiritual, political, social conjuncture of our lives, is who do we include in the sacred lives? Do we include the animals? Do we include the environment? How do we do that, right? One of the great things about Unitarian Universalists is they like big questions, and they struggle with them, and they're very skeptical of quick answers. That's the tradition, right? Catholics, in the tradition I was born in, we like systematic thinking so we can get everything answered, right, to deal with our anxiety, right? So I'm neither a Catholic, but I'm very friendly to the Unitarians. Some of the people in the United Church of Christ who have tried to recruit me into one of their congregations said to me, we're like Unitarians contemplating Christ. We're very close to the Unitarians, right? So I think maybe what we can do today is begin with a little bit of a spiritual contemplation. And then I want to go to a text with Dr. King that I talked about and just read it and think about it with you. Not so much a lecture as a conversation with you. Because in a strange way, Dr. King seemed in many ways even more relevant today than he was when he was alive. In a way that I don't think I appreciated when I was younger. And in this book, he actually has debates the Black Power movement and talks about tactics and strategies. And you have the sense of King as a person of his historical moment. Someone who is involved in the very important struggles in his own time. But before I do that, good ex-Jesuit that I am, I'm going to begin with something that we call, let's begin, let me just begin here with, let's see. Hold on, folks. Sorry about this. I had it all set up. So Ignatius is this strange, sort of minor nobility boss person who is not a firstborn son, therefore won't achieve any land. He spends most of his youth in fights and chasing women, which is what young men did at that time of the nobility. And he has a conversion experience, and he begins to go through his own process that would lead to the development of something called the spiritual exercises, which is a 30-day retreat that people take. Some people take a modified version. I took a 30-day retreat when I was very young. So it's sort of stuck with me. And what I want to do today is, first of all, get yourself in a position that's comfortable. If closing your eyes and listening a little bit to the air conditioner sound is good for you, do that. Do a few deep breaths that come out of your gut, right? You ever notice babies, they breathe from their gut? So do that a little bit. Take care of yourselves that way for a bit. And I'll stay silent for a while you accommodate yourself to this question. And imagine that you are in a place of comfort, a place where you can review the events of the last week, looking for what things were blessings, what things were difficult, who were the people who gave you gifts you weren't expecting. This congregation is thinking so much about Molly and Dove and their union, and what that means for this congregation, their families, their friends. And this contemplation in Latin is called contemplatio ad amorum, contemplation to attain God's love, or to gain love. And Ignatius, being a bit of an OCD character, begins with notes to every prayer. And he begins this way. First, it is well to remark two things. The first is that love ought to be put more in deeds than in words. In Spanish, en hechos, en vez de palabras. The second, love consists in interchange between the two parties. That is to say, in the lover's giving and communicating to the beloved what he has, what she has, what they have or can. So, on the contrary, the beloved to the lover. So that if one has knowledge, they give it to the one who does not. The same for honors and riches. And so this, the one to the other. And I'll just do one of the first points of the contemplation. The first point is to bring to your memory the benefits received in creation itself, and the particular gifts that you've received, and which much feeling how much the divine has done for us and for you, and how much the divine one has given me of what they have. The second point is to understand the divine dwells in creatures, in the elements, giving them being, in the plants, in animals, feeling in them, in persons, giving them to understand, animating them, giving them sensation, giving them knowledge. The third is to consider how the divine works and labors for us in all things created on the face of the earth. That is, behaves like one who labors, as in the skies, elements, plants, fruits, cattle, giving them being, preserving them, giving them sensation. The fourth point is to look at all these good things and how they've come to be. Although I may have poor power compared to this divinity, yet it cares for me and spurs me to justice, to goodness, to mercy. As from the sun descends the rays from the fountains and the waters. Then I reflect on my life and see, where have I found it? Where have I given love? Where have I received? So spend some time with that. No need to rush. Consider the gifts that were offered, received, celebrated, just in these last couple of days. And thank whomever or whatever divine presence you wish to thank. When you're ready, come back to our circle. Attend to the feelings that have emerged and the thoughts and images that have come to you during this period of contemplation. Now, granted, spiritual exercise is 30 days long, so we're doing a very abbreviated version of it. But maybe someone would want to share an image that came to them, or a thought that came to them. Whatever spurred it up. One of the interesting things about Ignatian spirituality is, in the end, if you read the text, you realize that Ignatius really doesn't believe people are intellectually convinced that God exists. I would never say this to Jesuits, they would get all twisted, but I think what he believes is that God comes to us in dreams and visions and desires, and that we have to sort them out. And which is sort of weird when you think about Ignatius, but I think underneath there's a skepticism to the intellect. So maybe it's pre-Protestant or post-Protestant, I don't know. So what do people think? What came up, what images came in?
I don't know if you can see it. It's you.
Yeah, the infinite regress. Yes. Yeah. Infinite regress. And it's sort of funny, right, when you think about this. I was thinking about that too, right, that none of it is me, yet it represents me. The sociologists call that like the given self and the self received, right? Other folks, things that came up with you, feel free to share. Yes?
Yeah, I had an image of like grass and animals and beings, and like them being animated by that spirit of, in the air and the water and everything. It's just like, I don't know how to explain it, but like, the energy or spirit moving through everything kind of just, and like that if we could just be still and peaceful in ourselves and feel that movement through us, like that we might not be so angry at each other.
That actual motion of the spirit, to a certain extent, alleviate the kind of anger. And for those of you who have not grown up in this society, this is a really angry society. I mean, you've been here during the visit, and it's been great, and we love having you, but this is a very angry society in many ways, and very frustrated, right? And the people who run it are very cynical, right? And our friend Karl just always talks about, they're in the cash out phase of their accumulation cycle. So I think for those of you who come from, let's say, the United Kingdom, I'm sure there's anger there. I've noticed it on certain occasions, especially after Labour came to power. There's some anger there. But I think that maybe what we can think about is that is misplaced energy, right? That's frustration. Because the older I get, and this is weird because I was part of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Liberation movement, the more I see the power of nonviolence. The power of nonviolence as not only a tool, but a way, a path through chaos. And remember this, King is posing for himself chaos or community, right? I'm going to retitle that Chaos and Community, or Community Within Chaos, right? Which is really what the U of O, Faith+Works hub is trying to do, right? That's the way I'm reading it anyway. Other folks, as they were contemplating, what came up? What images came up? Yes, please.
Well, I wasn't thinking so much about the interdependent web of the environment so much as I was thinking about how blessed I am. And as I get older, I kind of reflect on this a little more, and I talked about this before, but there's been a lot of tragedy in my life and in my upbringing, and through it all, there's been such a tremendous amount of love that came from my mother, my uncle, who helped to raise us. As damaged as they both were from tragedies that had occurred in their lives, they were able to give my brother and I a really good life, a life of love and optimism and security. And I think about the relationships that I've been in and how fortunate I am. A good friend of mine, when Karen and I first met or got together, we were up in Cape Cod.
And that's the best place to be as you start a relationship. Cape Cod. Just a side note.
And my good friend Paula, who is a Unitarian that I knew from New Brunswick and then again later, was kind of thinking about my late life and then meeting Karen for the first time, and she said, "Frank, you are a lucky man." And it stuck with me. I mean, it just, there are ways to gain strength and there are ways to move forward. And I feel fortunate.
That's a beautiful sharing. And the Jesuit tradition is you examine that.
Yeah.
And you go over, and Mindy learned the gratitude examen when she was at the spiritual camp, where you go through the day and just be thankful for the things that happen to you. Yeah. Right? And I hear a lot of what you're saying is sort of like, wow, people who were very fragile and broken still gave me a good life. They were able to do that. Yeah. Right? And I just want Karen to add on to it. She was saying something. Karen, you really don't think I'm going to let you go on this one, do you?
I think you are very lucky.
All of us who know Karen agree.
There we go. So say all of us.
I will say something.
Please do.
I was thinking, and it does with Frank, is that
That's a discipline. That's not, in the United States, we tend to split love and discipline, right? And the older I've gotten, the more I realize that love requires discipline, right? We live in a society that's consumeristic, it's very superficial, but one of the things that, as I've gotten older, I realized, without discipline, there cannot be love, right? And without, undisciplined love leads to chaos. So I think that's a really, like, you're working on this, right? And in one of the Christian traditions, the idea of virtues is they're practices over time. You keep on practicing them and evaluating yourself. For those of you who are really interested in that, there's a philosopher, Scottish philosopher called Alistair MacIntyre, wrote a brilliant book on virtue. Other folks, while they were thinking, contemplating, the newlyweds, you don't have to speak. You've spoken enough. Or you've been spoken for enough.
Still pretty overwhelmed.
Yeah, I bet you are.
That's the,
I bet you are.
That's one point for the exercising question.
Yeah. I was telling, I think, Minnie, where's Doug? I was trying to get them to sign stuff. So I could imagine you were more overwhelmed.
But there was a case of, like, so often you have to go through an exercise like the one you just did up, and your mind goes to all these dispersed rooms. And then yesterday it was just everyone and everything in this little 6-hour window. You could just see it. You have to meditate, it was just all there.
Yeah. There's a point in the spiritual exercise where Ignatius asked they call it the exercise, or the person doing the exercise, to look over, to almost have like a bird's eye view of the world and see all these people suffering and living and loving and dying and being born. It's that sense, right? And when you have these like events, now I'm speaking as an anthropologist, right? When you have these sort of events that are both symbolic and real, like a marriage, it's almost like your whole life has come together and you're viewing it all. Your whole support system is there, right? And what I saw yesterday as not just a minister, but I am a social scientist, right? Is to a lot of love and care and concern for you all, but also like people, I think there's a possibility of freedom within a commitment that was entertained by them. Because your parents talked about, that was a great one. I love that story. I hope it was taped. And your parents talked about you, about how you grew up, Molly's. And I think when people see that, they begin to think, I could do that. Yeah, that's right. That's right. They begin to think, hold on. In order to have love, there has to be a discipline, but there has to be a community, right? So the way I look at it as a minister, I don't think I said this yesterday, was y'all getting married too, because you're going to support these folks, because they've supported you, and that's how we get along, right? So I think, it's one of those things. Like I'm sure you guys are overwhelmed, and you're a bit of an introvert, I think. I have noticed that about him. You're a bit of an introvert, so it takes a little more time to translate. Whereas Molly's like me. Right?
She's been on the phone since 7 a.m. this morning, debriefing it.
We expect nothing else from our Molly. So I did that really to sort of calm us down, get us to start thinking, and really I would recommend it out of whatever faith tradition you come from, to do an examen at the end of the day, right? Just say that, first of all, it's good for you psychologically to think about what you can be grateful for. And sometimes it's just that I can breathe, that I have a bed to sleep in, that I have people who love me, and I feel that I can't fall without people trying to school me, right? Janice, that was wonderful music yesterday. You just bowled me over. We have a cotton for her again as a contribution. Yeah! I really loved it. Now, I only know Janice as sort of my student. We did Capital together, and we've done U of O stuff together. But I didn't know you as a musician. So thank you. Okay. Contemplation done. Let's talk about power. And what I want to do is use Dr. King's words towards the end of his life to consider the historical conjuncture we're in. And when people are at the tap root of a society, when they write something and 40, 50 years later, people are still saying, yeah, that sounds like today. So let's think about that. So I'm going to share this with you. And Dr. King writes here, the plantation and the ghetto were created by those who had power both to continue to confine those who had no power and to perpetuate powerlessness. The problem of transforming the ghetto is therefore a problem of power, a confrontation between the forces of power demanding change and the forces of power dedicated to preserving the status quo. And the Unitarian tradition, from the Transcendentalists to the Abolitionists and forward, has been dealing with power, giving power to those who did not have it. And then Dr. King says, you can see he's a philosopher of religion, power, properly understood, is the ability to achieve a purpose. That's all it is. That's all it is, right? It is the strength required to bring about social, political, or economic changes. In this sense, power is not only desirable, but necessary in order to implement the demands of what? Of love and justice. Of love and justice. And Cornel West constantly talks about justice is love in public, right? Or love, right? Justice is love. One of the greatest problems of history, now you got to think about this. This is Dr. King saying, okay, I'm going to tell you what one of the greatest problems of history is, right? It's towards the end of his life. Is that the concepts of love and power are usually contrasted as polar opposites. Love is identified with a resignation of power, and power with a denial of love. It was this misinterpretation that caused Nietzsche, the philosopher of the will to power, to reject the Christian concept of love. It was this same misinterpretation which induced Christian theologians to reject Nietzsche's philosophy of the will to power in the name of the Christian idea of love. We can think about Paul's Corinthians 1:13, which we didn't read at the wedding because it always gets read at the weddings. I'm so glad you guys didn't read that. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless. Think about Donald Trump. And abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. Justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against it. So what Dr. King is offering us in this writing is an idea that we can combine the requirements of love and power. So, and let me say this as a US person who grew up here, albeit from people who were colonial subjects of the United States. As people of justice, we cannot be afraid to use power for the good. We're not going to be able to sequester ourselves. What's happening in society will affect us and our families. So we need to use power out of love and justice. Power has already been used as abuse, as violence in this country, but we need new modalities of power. And the civil rights movement was about that, right? And sometimes I think those of us who are justice thirsty in the United States, we want to not engage because it's a little filthy, right? So it's not as good as it should be. But we need to engage the society we live in, even if at times it doesn't feel the best. Right? So I want to bring to your attention this notion that the real issue in the United States, and as spiritual people, as people who are of a tradition, that what's power here has been used in an abusive way. It can be used in other ways. Why? Because we need communities of light. This community is a community of light. You say, oh, well, it's just not 10 of us or whatever. No. There were like 12, 14 people that organized the Young Lords Party. And they changed the face of New York City. Public health, education, all kinds of things. So these little lights that the video talks about is what we need in the US, along with the big movements that we're all part of. So I just want to bring that to your attention. And then, suppose I am a queer man, and James Baldwin is one of my saints. I'm going to read a little bit of James Baldwin. But let's talk a little bit about James Baldwin. Baldwin grows up in Harlem. He's precocious, let's say. He's preaching the gospel as not even a teenager in his church. He's from the Pentecostal movement. He goes to high school in New York City. He finishes high school, and he's writing throughout. And James Baldwin grows up in the post-World War II period, gets fed up with the racism in the United States, and goes live in France. Now, there's racism in France, right? But in that period, there was an acceptance of Baldwin, both as a black person and as a gay man, right? Or a bisexual, depending on how you want to, sort of think about Baldwin. Baldwin sort of becomes one of the 21st century prophets, right? And for us, we read Baldwin, and it seems so terribly clear that he was on some level talking to the future of the US, right? And part of his sanity was running away, going to France, going to Turkey, seeing other ways of thinking and being in the world, and then coming back. And for those of you who know the history of James Baldwin, he basically supported all his nieces and nephews. I mean, he was really the breadwinner for all of these. And he's writing a book on the anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation that he writes to his nephew. And this is a passage that I really wanted us to think about, right? So he writes. He's writing about what he calls white people. And if you listen to Baldwin throughout his speeches, he'll say, well, white people believe they're white, right? So I have to believe I'm black, right? So if you get that sense of Baldwin as already deconstructing the categories of America. Quote, the real terrible thing, old buddy, his nephew, is that you must accept it. And I mean that very seriously. You must accept them and accept them with love. For these innocent people have no other hope. They are, in effect, still trapped in a history which they do not understand. And until they understand it, they cannot be released from it. So there is a dialectic between understanding our own history and the possibility of freedom. The old Marxists would say the dialectical relationship between freedom and necessity. That you are free inasmuch as you know how necessary structures function. All right, brought the Marxism in. They have had to believe for many years, and for innumerable reasons, that black men or black people are inferior to white people. Many of them indeed know better. But as you will discover, people find it very difficult to act on what they know. Let me say this again. People find it very difficult to act on what they know. Let me apply it to myself. Edgar finds it very difficult to act on what I know, right? I think I came to consciousness in my life when I was like 30-something. I was like, oh, I'm alive. I'm living in history. I actually have freedom, right? So let's keep that phrase. To act is to be committed. And to be committed is to be in danger. Even when you get married. Even when you get married. Right? In this case, the danger in the minds of most white Americans is the loss of their identity. But these people are your sisters and brothers, your lost younger siblings. And if the word integration means anything, this is what it means. That we, with love, shall force our siblings to see themselves as they are, to cease fleeing from reality and begin to change. And he's coming from a position of love, right? And I think what Baldwin teaches us throughout his corpus of writing is that it's a terrible thing to be locked in categories that somebody else chose, that you were never able to deconstruct, right? You know, the United States is a very strange country, right? We have Europeans here, they have hundreds of years, they have feudalism, they had, you know, there's all kinds of stuff going on in Europe, right? We were born capitalist. We have no feudal memory, right? The Roman Catholics came and brought some, you know, but, you know, basically, we are a young country, right? With many sort of traces of history in us. And what we forget at times is that the categories that we have lived them have been imposed on us. And although I wouldn't say that identity can disappear, I think that would be foolish, I will say that you are as free as your ability to understand historically how you got to where you are and the categories you use. So for me, what Baldwin is trying to tell us is that whatever is infinite hope, it's about thinking about the relationship between limit and the possibility of freedom. Right? What is it that makes us free? And I think we found a bit of an example yesterday in the wedding ceremony. Because you paradoxically said to each other, forever. Although you are not infinite beings. And that's really something to think about. That you were brave enough to say, with you forever, come what may. Right? And it strikes me that a society that is just imagines the possibility of doing something good and loving forever. Even in our finitude, right? Born out of chance, struggling for meaning, and the extension would say, dying without it, right? But we, as people of faith, of various faiths, believe that there is a meaning, and it's concrete in love and justice, and the use of our capacities to make a little better world. A little better world. Go ahead, sister.
But we don't live in justice.
We don't.
So we have to really express that out. Not live with that.
So what do we do if we don't live in a just society? What did Dr. King do?
Well, we don't live in this society. It's something that we have to live. And that we have to go in and actually take our whole mode of thinking and put it out there and try to influence. Because especially here in this country, I mean, it's so political and so power
Right.
hungry for greed.
Go ahead.
That's what the whole thing's about, is money.
Right.
Greed. The rich wants to get richer, and in order to do that, you have to keep the poor poor.
Right. That's right. I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. And the question then becomes, how can we engage in that struggle without us losing our humanity? And that's really the revolution of nonviolence. Nonviolence says we have to struggle. There has to be justice, but we can't become like the oppressors or the oppressive systems that
It's
we're
the only
counting.
country that want things better, it will.
Yeah, and we're at a point where there could be a war in Russia, there could be a war in China, and so our tradition, you know, both the Christian and the Unitarian tradition has the best of it, because a lot of Unitarians didn't do this, but a lot of Christian churches were warmongers, right? That's the truth of the matter. You know, I think we have to present a different alternative, right? And understand that part of it. And part of it is that, and this is what you're pointing to, is this question of it's coming from the top down, right? So Dr. King addresses this. He says, generally, we think of white supremacist views, I would say just capitalism in the US, as having their origins with the unlettered, underprivileged, poor class whites, right? Which you see in the Civil War, right? But the social obstetricians, which is an interesting way of saying it, who presided at the birth of racist views in our country were from the aristocracy. They were what? Rich merchants, influential clergymen, I'm not influential, men of medical science, right? Historians of political science from some of the leading universities of the nation, including the Columbia University where I teach. With such a distinguished company of elites working so assiduously to disseminate racist views, what was there to inspire poor, illiterate, unskilled white farmers to think otherwise? And that's the hustle of the US. The hustle of the US is, at least you're not this, right? But we have a different image of what life is. For us, it's in community. And I want you to reflect and be specific on this matter on yesterday. Who was there? People of all kinds of races, cultures, different historical backgrounds, and we had a blast. And if you read the eschatological literature in the Christian tradition, it ends in a big party, right? It ends in a table where no one's excluded. It ends in the breaking of bread and the multiplication of fish and all that. So for a moment, right, we have what anthropologist Victor Turner called a type of liminal state where values were put on the table, love was centered, and sharing was centered. And let me tell you, you had a really grassroots wedding because you didn't have the big banquet hall, you had, you had a very grassroots wedding. And I was like, at one point, it's hard not to be there for moments, right? Because I'm just sitting there saying, damn. Sorry about that. Damn. Molly and Doug had all these people doing this for them. And then the question was, what did they do for folks? How is it these people reciprocated in love with them? Because they had plowed the field. They had listened to these folks. They had made alliances with people. They had listened to people's stories. They had put in the work. The land had been plowed, and the seeds had been sown, and the harvest was great. So what I would say, as this congregation, is you're doing the work of love and justice. Stick with it. Right? Redemption doesn't come at the blast of a horn, as some of our Mormon friends do. Redemption comes in this day-by-day community, in small circles of hope, and constantly inviting people in. Even people from the United Kingdom come here, right? And all over the world, there are little communities just like us doing this work. Forget about what the news is saying on some level, right? Because all they want to do is the drama. Right? Continue to build this little community, this little light. And I'm certainly going to be here for you in whatever way I can in East LA, fighting the good fight as well. So what I'd like to do now is simply do another video, because I'm that kind of rev, right? And do our last video and think about the song the person who sings the song actually dies later on. But think about the message of the song in terms of what it means to care, right? In the Jesuit tradition, we call it cura personalis, care of the person, and cura apostolica, care of the work. And no congregation will flourish, and I'm not talking about how many people show up. No congregation will flourish that does not have care of the person as its center and care of the work. They have to go together. If you just care about the work, then you're a business. If you just care about the person, it might be a cult, right? So I would say both of those things are necessary. So Douglas, if you put the video. And I'll do a final prayer, but I just want to say to both of you, to get married and proclaim love the way you have is very utopian, and we need a lot more utopias on this planet, a lot more utopias. Amen?
Amen. That's it.
Ashe.
We start brilliance when the world is asleep. There are things we can have, we can keep. If they say, who cares if one more light goes out in the sky of a million stars? Flickers, flickers. Who cares when someone's time runs out? If a moment is all we are, or quicker, quicker. Who cares if one more light goes out? I do. The reminders on the floor from your feet, and when someone's time runs out. If a moment is all we are, or quicker, who cares if one more light goes out?
To reform evil. It's kind of my thing.
So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about that. The You're the light, and you care. You do, and you gotta keep on doing that. And I'll do a final blessing, which is our tradition in the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. I didn't explain who we are. We're a church that came out of the Black Pentecostal movement. Holiness movement. Our ministers were thrown out of their churches because they were members of the LGBTQ community. And 33 years ago, by the grace of God, and a very fierce Black lesbian founded a church in her living room with all these young LGBTQ people, and we're still going. When I was ordained, there were 60 of us ordained. Some of us came from Latin America, some from Britain, some of our peers are Britain. And so I'll bless you. And so let's come together and consider that history and grace has brought us into this space. That the divine light is in us. That this weekend has been filled with love and laughter and dance. That we will nurture these moments in times of darkness and doubt. That we will consider what freedoms we have and how best to use them to make this place and this world a little better. We ask the Divine Spirit to come to our lives, to fill us with light, to fill us with the desire to pray and act to build a more decent society. Blessings on all those who have come long ways and will now travel. Blessings on those who stay to build our community. And as we say in the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, Amen, Ashe.
Amen.
You're welcome. And no charge.
There's probably some more cookies. There's also.
In fact, we found 100 chocolate chip cookies that somehow didn't end up on the cookie table.
This is